All right, so good morning, everybody. We're here. I'm Jasper Smith, board member of the Urban Financial Services Coalition, San Francisco Bay Area chapter. And I have the honor today of having a conversation with this gentleman you see to my left, Mr. Arnold Grisham. Arnold, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. I know we've got a few targeted questions, but we're gonna kind of, I want people to get to know, like, who is Arnold Grisham? And I'll pause there. I'll let you go. Who is Arnold?
I am and by the way, thank you all for inviting me here today. I'm a poor boy from the south side of Chicago who got a number of breaks. I call myself somewhat of a survivor. I grew up in a community, where not many people that look like me made it out of that community. And I was fortunate enough to go to DePaul University. I was a C student at DePaul University, and I saw my buddies and my future wife go to grad school, and I asked the school, I said, can I get an MBA program? And they didn't hesitate. They let me in the MBA program with my C average, and the rest is history. DePaul was one of the most important institutions in my life. And then second was being able to get on with Wells Fargo Bank. And Wells Fargo Bank hired me in Chicago. I was there for 5 years, and then they told me that my next paycheck was going to be picked up in Oakland, California. And I remember going home and telling my wife that the bank wants me to move to Northern California, and she turned around and she said, well, how are you going to get home for dinner? And so the biggest sales job of my life was convincing the Chicago girl to come to the Bay Area. And in working for Wells Fargo actually moved me along faster than I was ready to be moved along. And I remember some of my first jobs at Wells Fargo. I went home and I told my wife, I said, when these people ask me questions, they're actually listening to me. I never felt in Chicago with the racism of 1970 Chicago that anybody was ever listening to me. And so I had a pretty good run at Wells Fargo. I was in the East Bay in a commercial banking unit. I was the chief credit officer for that. Then I was promoted to regional manager. I ran the region for Wells Fargo in the East Bay. And then at the first interstate merger, they kicked me up to San Francisco, and I ran corporate banking. I ran corporate banking nationwide, and I ran financial institutions nationwide. And so, there are two journeys. One journey is your outward journey, and the other journey is your inward journey. And my inward journey has always been someone who had imposter syndrome and who had survivor guilt. And part of how my imposter syndrome, should I just continue?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions we were going to talk about,
Sure.
is imposter syndrome and how that may have played a role in your career,
Sure.
or how that still may be relevant to some professional staff.
One of the ways that the imposter syndrome played out in my life is I remember I was crossing the bridge. My boss had told me he wanted me to be in his office at a certain time. And before I got across the bridge, I got a call from him. He says, Grisham, hurry up and get your butt in my office. The board of directors of Wells Fargo have elected you an executive vice president. And I said to myself, I didn't ask for that. I said, they're going to find me out now. I said, I don't think I'm doing a particularly good job as a senior vice president. And now they want me to be executive vice president. They're going to find me out. I'm going to fail. And we're going to pull the kids out of private schools, sell the house, and move back to Chicago. But and then I went into one Embarcadero, and I was so I don't know what you would call it, but I actually wrapped my car around a post. I was pushed along faster than I was ready to be pushed along at times, and so the big struggle for me was an internal struggle of, can I do it? Am I ready to do it? And what have you. But part of the imposter syndrome is I work like a dog. When you have the imposter syndrome, you really are working hard to make sure that you are as good as they think that you are. okay?
Yeah.
So I was always the first one in, the last one to leave. And I said, they'll never know how long I work because I'll be there when they get there, I'll be there when they leave. And I remember someone once asked me, what time did I set my alarm clock? And I said, my job wakes me up. I said, I don't need an alarm clock.
So let me ask you this, Arnold. So with, like, imposter syndrome is still a big concern for people today, feeling like they're not adequate or up to snuff to do the job. Did you tell anybody?
No.
Like, was there a mentor?
I really, the first time I started talking about the imposter syndrome was when I wrote this book. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Is that sometimes people can see people like me or people in this room, and they think that maybe the road was easier than what it was. And what I wanted to try to describe in the book is that there's some things that a lot of us suffer from in silence. And so I wanted people to know, especially Black folks, that they're not alone. I'll give you another example. I was never a particularly good public speaker. And one of the things that I talked about in my book, and I talk about in the speech, I had a stump speech that I would make because Wells Fargo, once you got to a certain level, they sent you to a speech consultant. And one of the things the speech consultant taught me is that every successful executive has what he called a pearls of wisdom speech in his back pocket. So if called to speak on short notice, you had something that you could talk about something that you've actually thought about. And so one of the things I talked about in the speech was what I called confronting your boogeyman. And what a lot of us do is that we focus on our strengths and we make our strengths stronger, and we hide our weaknesses and we make our weaknesses weaker. And I said the secret is to lead with your weaknesses, painful as it is. You lead with your weakness, and that's the only way you can make a weakness a strength. And in that speech, people would come to me afterwards and they'd say, what you just said about that is the same weakness that I have, and I've been hiding it.
Yeah.
But I just wanted people to know that, especially Black folks, that they're not alone. And I just know there's so many people like me in the workplace that they may be doing well, but they're suffering in silence.
Well, let me ask you this. So how do we get people to open up about some of those inward struggles? Like how do we do that?
Well, I think the only way is you have to have the courage to lead with your weakness. And you make a mistake, you have a bad day, you have a bad review, it's not the end of the world. You move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been a big part of what I've tried to do.
Nice. And do you find yourself even today in your current role or just in life, do you find yourself having to mentor other up-and-coming professionals, managers, leaders, and trying to tell that story to them to believe it's going to be okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Nice. And then I know we talked about the survivor's guilt was another topic we were going to kind of get through. So for people who aren't really understanding, like survivor's guilt is, you feel...
Well, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I talked about it a little bit earlier when I talked about leaving my neighborhood.
Yep.
And I knew so many guys that were smarter than me, worked just as hard as I worked, but something would happen and they didn't, they didn't get ahead. The other thing that happens, that all of you know that happens to Black folks, one bad boss can just derail a whole career. And so I've had that bad boss. I just survived the bad boss. But for so many Black folks, they don't survive. So that syndrome that is real. The other way it played out for me personally is some of you knew my first wife, and she was the healthiest person on the planet. She never had a cold. She used to say to me, what's it like to have a cold? And she was diagnosed with lung cancer and was given 6 months to live. And we fired that doc, and she lived for 5 years. And the overriding emotion that I have is why did I get to live? Why did I get to live? Why did she die? And I'm a Christian, and I believe that if you're given this life, there's a responsibility to do something positive with it. So the thing that has stayed with me with her passing is that I got to live, she died. There's something I'm supposed to be doing to justify my work, my walk on this earth. And so that stays with me in terms of trying to be of service, trying to help other people, trying to help especially folks that look like us, to have them understand whether it's the imposter syndrome or survivor guilt, that you're not alone.
And was some of that the inspiration behind writing the book?
Well, it's interesting. I knew you're going to ask me the question of why do you write a book?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of reasons to write a book. One is that we as a people, we used to have kind of an oral history that we would pass down, and I think so much of that has been lost. And I see writing your story as being taking that oral history and making sure that there's a recording of it. And so I define success in writing this book is that if nobody read this book other than my kids, it would be a success. The other reason why you write a book is that if you don't define who you are, somebody else will. And then, when I was coming here, I thought of another reason, because I felt, being here in this Bay Area community, my family, we've had triumphs and we've had tragedy. And it didn't matter which it was. There are people in this community that have kind of lifted us up, regardless of whether it was a triumph or tragedy. And what came to me on the way here is writing the book, talking about the book, talking about my struggles and triumphs has really been a cathartic experience. And just from that standpoint alone, it's been valuable.
Lovely. Simple question, or maybe not. How did you come up with the title for the book?
It just came to me. It just came to me. And in fact, one of the things that I haven't said to you all is that I've started a second book, and the second book is a series of essays, and one of the essays is reading, writing, and rewriting. And because so many people have come to me and they've said, how do you get started? How do you write a book? How does it just seems like it's a daunting task just to even start it. And there was a writer, I can't think of his name, I think some of you may know who he is. He talked about the 10,000 hour rule. Mm-hmm. And that, like a Steph Curry, people see him as he is today, but they don't see the 10 or 20,000 hours that he spent, honing that craft. Mm-hmm. For writers, the 10,000 hours is reading. People that read can be good writers, because when you read, you're developing this repertoire of just stuff that comes to you as you write. The second thing that makes a good writer is what they call listening to the omens, okay? And that is, there's a famous book by Paulo Coelho called The Alchemist. And it's a young boy who's in search of his fortune, and he goes all through the land looking for this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And as he is open to the universe, omens come to him, things come to him. As he closes down, things close down. So the title is one of those things that came to me, okay? The third thing that allows somebody to be a pretty good writer is what they call rewriting. Every successful writer loves rewriting, and they live to rewrite. They just want to get their thoughts down on paper so then they can get to the rewriting part of it, okay? So those everybody has their take on what it takes to be a writer, but those are the three things that I believe. But now that I've said that, as you go through this life, and you read people that talk about writing, they talk about rewriting. Rewriting is the whole ball game. That you write a paragraph, you walk away from it, you come back to it, you see a better way of saying what you just said, and those of us that do that really fall in love with the concept of rewriting, because when you write, you can't have a deadline. You can't have it's done when it's done, but but rewriting and reading are the ball game.
Lovely, lovely. What do you have a favorite chapter or section of this book that you wrote?
Well, it's funny you would ask that question. I had, and I wrote the book myself, no ghostwriting, never anything like that. And I had an editor that once I finished the book and he was edited, he said that you've got to talk about what's the takeaway. You got to pull all this stuff together and say, okay, what's all this about? Yeah. And so he caused me to write what I call an epitaph, okay? And so I'd like to, if it's okay, I'd like to read the epitaph to you. Should have bookmarked this. But anyway, here's the epitaph. My life has been a study of making a way out of no way. I made a way out of no way when my father lost his job and I had to figure out how to complete my education. I made a way out of no way by getting a DePaul University BS and MBA that gave me the confidence and credentials to become one of the first generation of African American business executives to enter an unwelcoming and unfriendly world. I made a way out of no way when I was stopped at every turn by institutional racism in 1970 Chicago as I tried to navigate a banking career and move to California with Wells Fargo. I made a way out of no way as my family adjusted to the increased cost of living in California as we worked to create a better life for ourselves. I made a way out of no way as I navigated through my imposter syndrome and survivor guilt as Wells Fargo had more confidence in my abilities than I did. I made a way out of no way by starting a bank and saving another bank from failing, and thereby creating opportunities for others and myself. I made a way out of no way as my family suffered through losing the glue that held us together, the loss of Jane. I made a way out of no way as I redoubled my efforts in being service to others as I dealt with new survivor guilt and outliving Jane. And finally, I made a way out of no way in marrying Paulina, who's given me new purpose and has enriched my life through her academic and personal journey to help others. Because what's past is prologue, I'm confident that if necessary, I can continue to make a way out of no way because my journey continues. And it makes me so proud to see that journey, that way, has been passed on. My 19-year-old granddaughter, who seemingly, as she came out of the womb, was wise beyond her years, has been a driven, focused, and intense person. So now she's enrolled in UCLA, and she recently said to me, before reading my epilogue, "Can I tell you a secret, Grandpa? At first I just had a will, but I didn't see a way. Then I willed myself into a way, and now there is a way. Where there is a will, there is a way." Bailey Holloman. Again, I hope what I have written will be helpful to a few people.
That's beautiful.
So that's my story.
Lovely.
And one last thing I'd like to say that has been emotional part of this journey. And it's only when I wrote the book that so many people that I've known over the years have come back and they've embraced me and caused me to see that these people were with me during triumphs and tragedy, and that I've been so blessed to have so many people in the Bay Area that I can call part of my family.
And I guess the last question, anybody who's an author, where can we get your book?
Yeah, I think I have a few copies.
Love it. But yeah, we want to open it up for a few questions from the audience.